The morning the calls began, I was still half asleep, standing barefoot in my kitchen when my phone started vibrating like it was trying to shake itself apart. I thought it was a wrong number until I saw the screen. 189 missed calls. Every single one from the same man who had laughed in my face the day before. I am Evelyn Maren, 52 years old, and until yesterday, I was the operations director at SummitRisk Technologies. 21 years of my life belonged to that company, or at least I believed they did. The phone rang again. I let it ring. My voicemail lit up with another message, his voice cracking, desperate. Evelyn, pick up right now. I poured coffee, hoping the heat in my hands would steady me. It didn't. The phone rang again, long and insistent, and I finally answered. Before I could say hello, Brendan Cole, the same CEO who had smirked across the conference table and told me to enjoy my early retirement, started screaming. Why do you own? His voice broke. Then came back louder. Why do you own our platform? For a moment, I said nothing. I just listened to the panic he didn't bother to hide. Yesterday he acted like he was untouchable. Today he could barely breathe. I'm going to need you to calm down, I said softly. And stop shouting. Evelyn, this is not a joke. You need to explain right now. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He had no idea what he had triggered. No idea what lived in the dusty corners of a company's past. No idea what a younger version of me had done to protect the work we built when SummitRisk was nothing more than a handful of engineers trying to survive. He didn't know he had stepped on the one mine I buried 2 decades ago. Brendan, I said, steady for the first time in days. You should check your legal files. What did you do? He snapped. Tell me exactly what this is. But I had already hung up. I stood there, phone silent in my hand, and let the weight of his panic settle. 24 hours earlier. None of this existed. 24 hours earlier. I was still the woman they pushed out the door. The day before the calls, I sat across from Brendan Cole in a glass-walled conference room that felt colder than any Denver winter. He didn't bother with small talk. He didn't even pretend to care why I'd been summoned. Evelyn, he began, sliding a slim folder toward me. We're initiating a performance realignment across leadership roles. It's time for fresh energy. I kept my hands still in my lap. Realignment, I repeated. That's what we're calling it now. He lifted his eyes, bright and empty. You've been with SummitRisk a long time. 21 years, that's an extraordinary run. He clasped his hands theatrically, but our investors want agility, new blood, a modern profile. So this is a termination, I said. It's an early retirement package, he corrected. Already smiling. You should enjoy it. I let out a dry laugh. You're forcing me out. Brendan, that's not how I'd phrase it. He tapped the folder. This is generous. You'll have time to rest. You deserve that. Rest isn't what I want, I said, finally looking him in the eye. I want honesty. His smile sharpened. Honesty? If you're not comfortable with our direction, the door is right there. There it was. The line he'd practiced in the mirror, the one he was certain would shut me down. I closed my laptop, keeping my voice steady. Thank you for the clarity. He stood, extending his hand with a smirk that cut deeper than any insult. Enjoy your early retirement, Evelyn. I shook his hand because dignity was all I had left in that moment. Then I walked out past the junior analysts I mentored, past the engineers who once stayed overnight with me to fix a broken risk engine, past the interns who used to ask me for career advice. No one spoke. Some didn't breathe. Their eyes flicked toward Brendan's office, then back to me, wide and uneasy. I wasn't sure why their faces held fear instead of relief, but that chill in the room followed me all the way to the elevator, pressing against my ribs like a warning I didn't yet understand. I went home that afternoon carrying a silence that felt heavier than the folder Brendan had pushed across the table. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my coat. I just sat at my dining table, staring at my hands, wondering how a life could be dismissed in a meeting that lasted less than 10 minutes. After a while, I got up and opened the hall closet, looking for, I don't know what. Proof that I had mattered. Maybe. My fingers brushed over old notebooks, a box of conference badges, a stack of employee recognition plaques that hadn't meant anything even when they were handed to me. Then I saw a banker's box I hadn't touched in years, sealed with yellowing tape, Someone had written my name on it in marker during the early SummitRisk days. Back when we were working out of a drafty warehouse in Rhino and pretending we weren't 3 weeks from collapse. I dragged it onto the table. The tape peeled apart with a soft crack. Inside was the messy, frantic, half-built skeleton of a company trying not to choke on debt. Unpaid invoices dated 2007. Printed emails from the founder, Daniel Creek, scrawled with notes in the margins. A napkin sketch of the original Risk engine workflow, back when no one believed it would work. And at the bottom, folded neatly as if placed there on purpose, was a packet of legal documents. I whispered it before I even understood it. No, not this. The top page bore the name Maren Analytics LLC, my name, my signature, a registration date from the crisis era. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. Daniel's voice came back to me, years younger, trembling with exhaustion. Evelyn, the lawsuits are circling. We need to put the engine somewhere safe for now. Just temporary. We'll transfer it back once the dust settles. I remembered telling him I didn't want that kind of responsibility. He insisted. Harper drafted the papers overnight. We filed them the next morning to keep the creditors from seizing everything we'd built. I held the documents in both hands. No, that can't still be active. But nothing inside that packet suggested otherwise. I spread the papers across my table, my hands shaking as memories I'd boxed away came rushing back. The year was 2007. Investors had abandoned us. Creditors called daily, and Daniel Creek, the founder who built SummitRisk out of sheer stubbornness, paced the warehouse floor like a man watching his house burn down. I remembered the night he cornered me near the server racks. Evelyn, we're out of time, he said, voice raw. If the lawsuits hit before we settle, they'll seize the engine. We need a shelter, something temporary. I am not putting my name on corporate property, I told him. That is not my role. It is for now, he insisted. Just until we get through this storm, I called Harper Linden, my closest friend from law school. She arrived at the warehouse at midnight, still wearing courtroom heels, hair pinned back like she'd run straight from a hearing. Harper looked over the documents, tapping each section with her pen. You want the engine protected? Then Evelyn needs full ownership until the lawsuit's clear, and before I sign off, I'm adding a safeguard. Daniel frowned. Safeguard. If you ever remove her without cause, she said. All rights revert to her automatically, non-negotiable. Daniel lifted both hands. Fine, whatever gets us through this. We filed Maren Analytics LLC the next morning. I never wanted the power it gave me. I was just trying to keep the company alive. Now, sitting in my quiet kitchen almost 2 decades later, I ran my fingers down the clause Harper had written. Involuntary removal without cause triggers immediate reversion of all licensing rights to Evelyn Maren. The last page where the transfer back to SummitRisk should have been was blank. No signature, no date, no record of completion. Yesterday's retirement wasn't a courtesy. It was an involuntary removal. I took a breath, snapped a photo of the documents, and sent them to Harper with a single line. Tell me if I'm losing my mind. She called within 2 minutes. Evelyn, are you alone? Her voice was sharp, all courtroom precision. Yes, I said. Tell me what I'm looking at. I heard papers shuffle, then a low exhale. This is not just valid. Evelyn, this clause is a live wire. You still own the LLC, you still control the engine, and SummitRisk's license ended the moment Brendan forced you out. That cannot be right. It is, she said. Every deployment they make after yesterday qualifies as infringement. Do you understand what that means for them? I closed my eyes. It means half the company could lose their jobs if this blows up. It means, Harper corrected, that they should not have removed you without cause. You did nothing wrong. They created this mess, not you. I felt the old loyalty stirring inside me, the instinct to protect the engineers who worked weekends, the analysts who trusted me, the interns who came to me crying after their first mistakes. Harper, I do not want to drag innocent people into a legal firestorm. You are not dragging anyone. You are updating records that should have been updated years ago. If they had done their jobs properly, none of this would be happening. I opened the state filing portal. The fields were familiar business name, owner, confirmation of rights. Everything was already tied to my information. All I had to do was renew the record and attach the original documents. Evelyn, Harper said softly, this is yours. They treated you like you were nothing. You do not owe them silence. My cursor hovered over the final button. One click would change everything. I pressed submit. For a second, nothing happened. Then a confirmation message blinked across the screen. The update was received, somewhere in the city. SummitRisk was still moving forward as if nothing had shifted beneath their feet. At the same time, I was sitting in my kitchen trying to slow my breathing. The legal department at SummitRisk was beginning its morning audit. A junior intern named Preston Howell, barely 21, earnest, always overdressed, typed the registry number for our risk engine into the state database. It was supposed to be a routine check before the Department of the Interior demo. I would learn later how it happened. Marcy, Preston's voice cracked across the quiet legal bullpen. Can you look at this, Marcy Porter? One of the senior paralegals wheeled over. What now? Kid Preston swallowed, pointing at the monitor. This cannot be right. Marcy leaned in. Maren Analytics LLC. Owner Evelyn Maren. Her voice went thin. Where is SummitRisk? That is the problem, Preston whispered. Marcy stood so quickly her chair rolled back. Do not touch anything else. I am calling Greg. Greg Billings, head of legal, arrived with his tie already loosened. What am I looking at? Preston stammered. Sir. The owner of the platform, our platform, it is not us. It is her. Greg pinched the bridge of his nose. God help us. When did this update go through? Timestamp says. Early this morning, Marcy said. Within minutes, executives flooded the legal floor, voices sharp, orders overlapping. Brendan's voice cut through everything. This is a clerical error. Evelyn voluntarily retired. We have the paperwork. Marcy looked him straight in the eye. Then produce it. Brendan opened his mouth, closed it, then snapped. I will get it. But he did not move, because he knew he could not get anything. By the time the sun rose, phones were ringing non-stop. Clients wanted explanations. The board wanted documentation. Someone from a federal agency had already sent an inquiry. And Brendan, who had strutted through the office 24 hours earlier, was now calling me over and over, each voicemail more frantic than the last, while the company he claimed to control was quietly slipping out of his hands. By the time I finally answered, Brendan's breath was shaking through the line. He didn't bother with a greeting. Evelyn, why do you own our platform? Why is your name on the registry? Why? Slow down, I said. You are not helping yourself. Do not talk to me like I am a child, he snapped. Tell me what you did. I did nothing, I replied. Maren Analytics LLC was created during the 2007 crisis. The transfer back to SummitRisk was never completed, and your decision to remove me without cause activated the protective clause. That clause is ancient, he said. It cannot possibly still apply. It does, I said. Every word of it. You should have read the documents before pushing me out. For a moment, all I heard was the thud of his breath. Then he shifted into a different register, slick, coaxing. Evelyn, listen. You and I can fix this quietly. I can authorize a generous consulting contract. You keep your dignity, and we move forward. No, I said, Vine. His voice hardened. Then understand the consequences. SummitRisk has legal teams that can bury you in filings. You do not want that fight. I am not fighting, I said. I am stating a fact. A notification flashed across my laptop, an email from Harper. She had already sent a formal notice to SummitRisk. Any attempt to demo, deploy, or distribute the platform constitutes intellectual property infringement. I heard Brendan inhale sharply. You involved lawyers. You involved them the moment you tried to pretend I retired voluntarily. This could ruin everything, he whispered. Do you understand that I do? I said. Do you? He did not answer. I could feel the panic rising in him, a tide he could no longer hold back, and he had no idea how much further he was willing to fall. The first call from the board came less than an hour after Harper's notice went out. I let it ring twice before answering. A clipped voice introduced herself. Evelyn, this is Marissa Hale, chair of the SummitRisk board. Brendan has informed us of a discrepancy in ownership. Discrepancy, I repeated. We want to resolve this amicably, she said. We can offer a consulting arrangement, a substantial one. No, I said. I am not for hire. A second voice cut, an older, male, impatient. Fine. Then a buyout, a simple transaction. We purchase your LLC at a fair price, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement. What is your definition of fair? I asked. Marissa replied quickly. We can authorize $200,000. I almost laughed. No. There was a long pause. Papers shuffled. Someone whispered off screen. She's not accepting that seriously. Harper, who sat across from me at my kitchen table, leaned forward and spoke loud enough for the microphone to catch. Your platform represents nearly half your valuation. Without Evelyn's licensing, your expansion into federal contracts collapses. $200,000 is insulting. Marissa's voice tightened. Who is that? My attorney, I said. She knows the numbers better than any of you. A younger voice broke through, uneasy and unfiltered. Marissa, if we had known she owned this, we never would have approved Brendan's restructuring plan. A heavy silence followed. Then another board member muttered, Where is Brendan? He is not on this call, Marissa said quickly. This negotiation does not involve him. In the background, I heard a door slam and Brendan shouting something muffled and furious. Someone must have muted him. Harper folded her hands. You can keep circling around the issue, or you can acknowledge the actual leverage Evelyn holds. The board stopped pretending. Their tone shifted from posturing to survival. They needed the engine, they needed the rights, and they were finally ready to talk about what that would cost. The negotiations dragged into the evening, each voice on the conference line growing tighter as Harper laid out the numbers with clinical precision. By the third hour, the board had stopped pretending they held the advantage. Marissa spoke first. Evelyn, what would it take to finalize this? Name your terms. Harper nodded at me, letting me speak for myself. I want a full acquisition of Maren Analytics, LLC. I said, $15 million, and a written statement correcting the lie about my exit. A low murmur rippled across the call. One man let out a sharp breath. $15 million. That is Harper cut in. That is the price of your company surviving the fiscal year, someone whispered. We are dead without the engine, forgetting the microphone was still on. Marissa swallowed, and Brendan, I kept my voice steady. He misrepresented my departure. He falsified internal records. I will not negotiate if he remains in leadership. There was no argument this time, only a curt reply. Consider it done. A minute later, another board member confirmed the vote, effective immediately. Brendan Cole is removed for misconduct. Somewhere in the background, through someone's unmuted audio, I heard a yell, a sharp, furious sound, then a door slamming. The line went silent again. Marissa exhaled. We accept your terms. Send the documents. Harper transmitted the contract. I reviewed each page twice, not because I doubted her, but because the enormity of the moment pressed against my ribs. 2 decades of being overlooked and overwritten, condensed into a handful of signatures. When I signed, my hand didn't shake. 20 minutes later, my bank sent a notification the wire transfer was complete. I set my phone down and breathed in a way I hadn't in years. No triumph, no gloating, just the quiet recognition that I had reclaimed something far larger than money. I had closed the door they tried to drag me through. Now I had to decide what kind of life I would walk into next. A week after the transfer cleared, I drove to the old warehouse in Rhino where SummitRisk had once lived on stale coffee and unreasonable hope. The building was leased to an art collective now. The loading bay repainted in bright colors. Nothing like the concrete box where Daniel and I sketched ideas on cardboard because we could not afford whiteboards. I stood outside for a moment, hands in my pockets, letting the echoes settle. Long nights, whispered promises, the belief that loyalty meant protection. It all felt like another woman's memories. The version of me who worked here had spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that never intended to make space for her. My phone buzzed. Harper again. You saw the news, she asked. What now? Brendan is under investigation. Falsified disclosures, misreporting licensing status, hiding internal warnings. It is not going to end quietly. I nodded. Though she could not see me, I am not getting involved. I know, she said. I just thought you should hear it from me. I appreciate that. She hesitated. What are you going to do next? I looked at the old warehouse windows, remembering every older engineer who had been nudged out, every colleague who whispered fears about age limits in tech, every silent exit I had watched before my own. I have been thinking, I said, about a program, training, recertification. Something for people over 50 who keep being pushed aside. Harper's tone softened. With what funding, $15 million is more than enough to start, I said, and I am not done building. There was a smile in her voice. This suits you, Evelyn, creating something of your own. I ended the call and took one last look at the warehouse before walking away. Behind me, the past dimmed. Ahead of me, there was finally space to breathe. They forced me into retirement, I said quietly, turning toward my car. But what I walked into was not retirement at all. It was the first life I ever chose for myself.